over the last few years, we've seen obviously so many incredible applications of VR in healthcare across pain management, mental health, physiotherapy, education and training, just to name a few. And we really saw such a big opportunity here in the UK to, well, over there in the UK, in fact, we're getting used to being somewhere new, about how we can bring everyone together. Before we get to that bit, I'll send it to you.
Excellent. Well, so we're going to talk to you today about the report that we launched in the UK, setting out an XR healthcare strategy nationally. And we're really excited about that. But we're here today to hear from you and to exchange ideas and to start a longer conversation. For us, we're really passionate about immersive healthcare. It's something that's brilliant and it's nascent in the UK. And we know that we've got a lot to learn from how you've worked in the US and more globally as well. However, I think it's something for us that we're really, really keen to understand is how you've grown business models, how you've grown collaboration, where finance works, how we govern XR healthcare safely. And so we're going to use this session today to have that discussion. And thank you all for coming along and joining us. Okay.
Also to flag very quickly as well, like obviously this does feel like quite a formal setting with these tables, but we're not expecting anyone to make official statements. This is the first step in a discussion as well.
Okay, next slide, thank you. So the reason why we're here is, I would sing this, but it's probably not a good thing to do. It started with a tweet. We worked separately in the UK, and there's been lots of great examples of XR healthcare initiatives. And one of the very interesting things that happened in the UK is the BBC XR lab closed down, it mothballed. And one of the people that were involved in the BBC said, wouldn't it be a nice idea if we gave our XR health lab to the NHS? And we had that conversation. We thought, well, actually, giving an XR health lab to the NHS is not really going to be helpful. What we need to think about is how strategically we can lead XR healthcare initiatives in the UK so we can grow, we can learn from each other, and we can develop it so it's at a standard whereby it's accessible for all. So this tweet was the start of where we are here today, and now we're here amongst lots of different friends, lots of different colleagues from academia, from the business world, and also from healthcare authorities. Sarah.
Oh, next slide, please. So we're not going to give you a full overview of the report. We just wanted to give you a bit of an understanding of all the incredible people that helped make it happen, many of which that are in the room today. You can access the report online at xrhealthuk.org. We'll give you the link at the end. But in this report, it ended up being a pretty substantial report that actually covered everything from the key evidence and applications of XR in healthcare across pain, mental health, well-being, physiotherapy, training and education, including patient education as well. And then we worked with Nottingham University and the National Institute of Health Research to do a health economic analysis on what sort of economic impact could this make? How could this actually save the NHS money? How could it improve patient outcomes? We worked with XRSI on the key considerations as well, from everything from cybersecurity and regulation to actually how we implement this in real life settings. And then we came across a series of key recommendations as well. Next slide, please.
So in order to bring together a strategy that was across the nation, we needed to bring together the key players in order to pull that strategy together. So in the UK, Healthcare Education England, NHSX, Audience of the Future, UKRI all contributed to work together to get to the place where we now have a clear vision and strategy for where we go with XR in healthcare over the next, well, into the future. The piece that was missing for us was the alliance. So a space where people can talk to one another, people can share information, people can get together and understand how we can take the agenda forward. So we formed the XR Health Alliance, which you can also find a website for to download the report itself and get information. But we feel that this collaborative will bring us forward in terms of our objectives for working together.
Okay. Yeah. We used to live in Gators for about 5 years before I moved out to Minnesota. Okay. What do you guys do?
Oh, I'll just do it here. There we go.
See, it's all about the conversation.
So we're just going to run through some of the recommendations that came out of the report and give a bit of insight into that as we go into the discussion. So next slide, please. So our first recommendation was we need to know what's going on out there, both in the UK, but I think there's a need globally to really understand who is doing what and where is that coming from? Is this happening in universities where people are researching that? Are there startups and SMEs? There's a real community in the entertainment sector as well. There are so many artists and games designers that are interested in doing things in well-being as well. But how are they finding partners, collaborators? How are they being funded? What sort of evidence base is out there as well? And so we really want to be able to create a baseline and see where people are based and understand the key challenges and opportunities they're facing. And that's why these roundtables are really helpful. And it's been something that we've actually been doing the last few years in the UK as well, doing that early research, but nothing that's formal just yet. We really want to understand business models, but I think ultimately we need to know the support that people need and how we can work together on that as well. Next slide, please.
So our second recommendation was around establishing centres of excellence. As we set out at the beginning, there are 5 key areas that we're focusing on. Those are mental health, physical health and rehabilitation, pain, clinical skills, and patient education. So in each of these areas, our objective is to set out a centre of excellence. And these would essentially be the meeting of academia, business, and clinicians or healthcare facilities. We bring those centres together with those kind of verticals in those different areas. What we hope to do is to create a pipeline from an idea all the way through to scaling across initially the area around the centres of excellence, but then further nationally. So the journey would be an initial collaborative research and development stage, then creating in the UK, we've got playbooks or global digital exemplars, essentially frameworks to replicate success. And then following that, we create an environment where testing, scaling, product development are possible. Look at the clinical and quality assurance to make sure that the regulations are there, to make sure that we're working safely. Key to us is a procurement framework that we're able to put the products on and that people are able to safely either purchase or sell. And then finally, distribution by a virtual pharmacy type model. So a GP or a doctor or a clinician being able to actually prescribe the product in the same way as they would prescribe medication. Next slide.
So yeah, I think the key underpinning structure for all of this is really thinking about how we work cross industry, and that includes creating new initiatives that can bring together academic research, healthcare providers, tech and industry, and the arts and entertainment sector as well, where there's obviously a wealth of skills as well. Because at the moment, I think what we've already found is that the funding models available often prioritise one organisation over another. And so thinking about new ways that we can support this work that can bring all those people together, but also create a common language as well about what those needs are and what can be developed. Next slide, please. And ultimately, we're really excited about how we can have this creative XR and healthcare ecosystem. How do we work with the hardware and software suppliers to think about what needs are there from a regulatory and development perspective? Do we need to have CE marked headsets? How does that work? And how can we start having conversations with them now? Working again with public funders and investors that can understand the models here. Thinking about how we work with healthcare and research and the creative industries as well. And ultimately with this is why we've started the XR Healthcare Association, a lot like the International VR Healthcare Association here in the US as well, that Bob Fine over here represents too. That is really that place where we can have that meeting ground and think about how this can work on a global scale as well. We obviously did this about the opportunities in the UK because we're based in the UK, and having the NHS is such an incredible tool because we can bring together people together under this one roof. But we're really excited about these opportunities to have these global conversations, including here today. Next slide, please. So that's it actually for this part of the conversation or the presentation. So you can find the report online at xrhealthuk.org, including some of the images from the slides today as well. And if you do have any questions, then you can reach out to us at info@xrha.org as well.
Just thinking in terms of we're a victim of our own success here. We were hoping to do an introduction for everyone in the room and in the virtual room. If we can, just very quickly, just say a quick wave, hello, your name and your organisation you represent, that would be great. We've got about 10 minutes, so say it quickly. We don't need a diatribe. If we could start with the room online, if you could call people out, that would be really, really helpful.
You do need to unmute them.
Need to unmute. Thank you. Team effort. So if there's anyone online in the hello, if there's anyone online that's watching that would like to introduce themselves, I think we saw Susan and Ryan Beams in there. If either of you would like to say hello to begin with.
Sure, I can start. Oh, good. I was hoping Ryan would start at the same time. I'm Susan Persky from the National Institutes of Health.
And I'm Ryan Beams from the Food and Drug Administration.
I'm Tom Caruso from the Stanford Chariot Program and also representing InvinciKids, a nonprofit that distributes immersive tech.
Tom?
Hi, I'm Rick Bieberman. I'm CEO of Sera Medical. We're based in San Francisco and do pre-surgical planning with augmented reality.
Tracy, are you there?
Hi, yeah, I'm a creative. Oh, look, video. Look, let's say hello. Hello. I'm kind of working in the realms of VR, and I created a haptic hug, and now looking from the Arts Council funding, and now looking at its exponential rise into something more holistic.
Brilliant. Thank you. Alan?
Hi, I'm Alan. I'm a PhD student writing a VR therapies. We do VR therapies dissertation on immersion design, and founder of Studio Bahia. We do therapies and training. We started out in refugee camps, so we take a mobile phone model approach. It's nice seeing everybody.
Okay. Ashish? No.
Just realised
Heather?
Hi, I'm Heather Bucalos. I'm a registered nurse and I represent VR for Health. I am an advocate for virtual reality for patient care. I used virtual reality when I was a cancer patient, and I sit on the board for 18 Loop, which helps get VR headsets to pediatric oncology patients.
And Belimani?
Yep. Hi, my name is Velumani. I'm from India. I'm representing SimInsights. SimInsights is a software-based company. We create authoring tools. It's a no-code authoring tool through which anyone can develop simulations, and so we are creating simulations specifically for healthcare industry currently.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else online that wants to introduce themselves that haven't yet? If that's silence, no. Sir, gentleman in the red shirt.
Yeah. Kemper Talley from Teledyne FLIR. We mostly work on detection systems, so left of healthcare needs, so like chemical, biological, radiological threats.
Rachel Michelson, medical XR Advisory Council lead at XR Safety Initiative.
Hi, Jonah with Scope-AR. We train medical device end users, so just hospital workers and physicians on how to operate complex medical devices, medical capital equipment. Please stop by our booth 419 tomorrow to hear a DNA on their experience.
I'm fine with Ivra.
If everyone could just speak fairly loudly just so that other people online can hear as well.
I'm Austin Edelman. I'm with Reality Hack, which is an XR hackathon at MIT. And I also work for Zender, which is a medical device company in Utah. Just working on trying to incorporate VR as an onboarding tool for the engineers who don't understand the context of the hospital for the medical device they're creating.
Christoph Leutzer, Director of the Visualization Core at Stanford, where we work with clinicians and engineers on medical mixed reality technology. And Fano Nakamiya, where we work with the DHA on healthy solutions for first responders.
We just ask anyone online if you could mute your microphones as well if you're not speaking.
Hi, I'm Charles Kirby. I'm running a startup called Cindy, SINDY, which is basically doing virtual reality prescriptions for weight loss and diabetes and keto patients.
Hi, I'm Fanny Garcia. I'm representing Hopscotch Interactive. We do virtual tours for real estate and commercial spaces. I'm also an Army veteran and I worked with the VA for a long time, so I'm just interested in mental health and VR technology.
Hi, I'm Amir Rubin. I formerly the founder and CEO of Sixth Sense, and now we got acquired by Penumbra Inc. Penumbra is a medical device company that is developing a platform, an immersive healthcare platform called the Real System. And it's designed to help mental health and physical health therapies delivered across the world.
Lincoln Reynolds. I'm here on behalf of Stryker Enabling Technologies to see how we can better leverage XR, AR, VR in the healthcare system.
I'm Eric Williams from Ohio University's Game Research and Immersive Design.
Hello, I'm Sky Daphne from Job. We specialize in recognizing surgical instruments, so we help in sterilization departments and surgery rooms to recognize what instruments in front of them, to assemble trays, and to also analyze the usage of surgical instruments during OR. We also help nurses with visual data entry by taking a photo of a reading. We can take that information and push it into the system, so you don't have to write notes and stuff like that. We have a booth as well. If you need to go to the bathroom tomorrow, we are next to it.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Riley Russell. I'm also with Penumbra. We do the Real Immersive Healthcare platform. My job is to help bring publishers and applications to that platform when it gets developed, rolled out to hospitals and patients.
Behind them wants to introduce themselves.
Oh, sorry. I
Oh
my gosh. My name is Liz Obiawe. I'm actually from the university in Florida, Nova Southeastern University, College of Osteopathic Medicine. So we actually use XR. We're developing educational platforms to be able to teach our medical students. So that's my specialty. Okay, so let me move away.
Welcome. There's some space further in if people want to move around as well.
We weren't expecting such a full house.
Al Santana from Persistent Technology in DC, and we work a lot with the VA on facilitating interoperability between the disparate systems that make up the electronic health record. We wanted to attend the conference to get a better understanding of how we could potentially leverage the data that we and the images that we have access to create XR, AR, VR solutions in the healthcare platform for the VA and other agencies across the globe.
Right. If we could just keep it to organization and name.
Eric Landon, Child's Play Charity.
Victor Hunter, Persistent Technology.
Zach Chun. I was with the Mirror 6 Sense for 11 years. Now I'm with Penumbra.
Greg Scott, I'm with Scope AR.
Aaron DeQuani, Scope AR.
Soren Hunter, Learjet.
Daniel Ruiz, yeah, also Max from Acquantemy, small startup company from Austria developing augmented reality software for medicine.
Nasib Zaman from Eyesight Quest.
Hi, Shane Pace, media and technology psychologist from Reality Science. Ed Hensmore, DICOM director.
Christina Podnar, XRSI.
Christina Dushkova from Story Features in the UK.
Brian Cameron, I'm with XRSI, and I have a startup called Electric Puppet with ophthalmology XR.
Divya Gender, also medical for XRSI, and interested in cyber health security biometrics.
Xander Ford with Conscious Founders.
Daniel Bernstein with Penumbra.
Stephen Patterson, MedVR.
Helen Out, I'm from Royal Holloway, University of London, Story Features.
Ivan Beeman from Sheffield Hallam University.
Matt Sansom, I'm head of delivery for the Audits and Future Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund and also for UKRR.
Hello everybody, Neil Ralph. I'm Head of Technology Enhanced Learning at NHS Health Education England.
Hi everyone, Rod Joyce, Deputy Director of Innovation at NHSX.
Hi everyone, founder and CEO of XRSI. And just as a key takeaway from today, I would like to add, if with your permission, on 10th of December, there's going to be an XR data classification roundtable. And a lot of you and all of you are invited to just input your name and everything that you want to contribute to, so we could invite you and have a part of it.
In the corner?
Oh, hi. Hi, I'm Chris Shi from China. Company called Shadow Creator. Provide like AR, VR services and out there. And we also work on this medical solution. We look at a few hospitals in China.
Thank you.
Farhan? Everybody, I'm Farhan. I'm the founder of Concept Health, and I'm also founder.
I'm Shanks Brown, I'm a PhD cardiologist and a CCIO at Westminster School in the UK.
I'm Jessica Stone. I'm a licensed psychologist in the US and the CEO and co-founder of Virtual Sanctuary.
And then over here somewhere. Oh no, we've done this corner, haven't we? All over the shop.
That's the room. Thank you very much, everybody. That's absolutely great. Wonderful representation from all across the globe. I think to set the context of the conversation today, we've got 4 key pieces that we wanted to discuss. First and foremost, we'd like to talk about the strategy. So in the UK, as we set out here, we set out a vision and hopefully a strategy for the future. I'm going to put a couple of people on the spot because they like it when I do this. In the UK, we've got a white paper and a report, and Rod and Neil are here today representing NHSX and Health Education England, who are 2 key members of the report as it went forward. For you gents, we've got to this position now where we've got kind of a vision for what we might do in the future. What do you see are the key next steps for us taking that vision and turning it into a reality?
If you want to, Rod, give you a few moments to collect your thoughts. What do we need to do next? Well, the first step really is about dissemination. So we need to raise people's awareness of the report and of our evaluations. One of the things that I'm coming up against time and time again is that we need to bring people with us, and not everybody has been exposed to the potential of XR technologies yet. So let's start off not assuming everybody understands at the level that we're operating at. Let's start to educate them. When we do that very quickly, we're identifying that there is a growing appetite, but there is also a question mark. Okay, this looks really good, but how do we know it actually makes a difference? How do we know it works? So one of the next key steps that we've got to address is bringing that evidence together, delivering, expecting evaluations, including return on investment, and expecting there to be peer-reviewed articles, so the research needs to be mobilized behind this. That's where we start to get confidence in these technologies. There's just a few thoughts.
Can I just also put in, because one of the key things for me that Health Education England's done really well nationally is to enable the use of kit and software. Can you talk a little bit about about that and how that's come about?
Sure. The team I look after for Health Education England is focused on the success of the application of learning technologies and simulation-based approaches to education training to our 1.4 million healthcare workers and 500,000 new people coming in each year into the workforce, plus beyond that really into other areas in social care as well. And one of the key tenets behind how we operate is to try and ensure a level of equity of access to efficacious learning approaches. So not just much more well-off teaching hospitals, but also how do we support our rural hospitals or our primary care centres, for instance. And also not just our doctors in training, who have enormous amounts of educational sort of requirements that we need to satisfy, but also our nurses, our allied health professionals, our psychologists, which is the field I come from. So one of the approaches we've taken is to create what we're calling our virtual XR hubs, because we want to facilitate and enable everyone to get an exposure to these technologies so they can start to try it out. So we start to generate some of that evidence. We take some control over the situation, don't expect it to happen organically, but actually make it happen through intention. So we've invested some money in quite a few hundreds of devices, virtual reality and mixed reality, and through we've got an approach where we facilitate access to those resources with lots of really useful applications uploaded. We enable people to bring that into their environment, try it out in some educational use cases. We capture the information. We enable them at the same time to raise up the infrastructure capability within their setting too. So it's, we need to make sure it works. Is your broadband fit for purpose really for you enabled, to enable you to access these resources? Is it done on a separate format away from your clinical systems, for instance, as well? And then also what we do is we facilitate some capability building too. So we enable them not just to grow some confidence, but to have the really to learn the skills as to how to apply that. And in our case, it's around some sort of educational use case. So not just is it a shiny bit of technology everyone gets excited about, but how do you integrate that into teaching? And how do you measure whether your learning objectives are being reached, for instance? So what we're looking to do is to influence thousands of educational kind of interventions across the country, accelerating that adoption and exposure to these tools, but also really seeing them adding value, because at the same time, this is not a big experiment. What I'm expecting to see is we're making a difference to the learners and the educators who, no doubt, as much as in this country, they're as up against it as they are back over the pond for us, considering the massive impact that the pandemic has had upon the sort of that education activity. So it's a big undertaking, but what I'm expecting to see is that not just we see some difference being made, but they think, do you know what, this could really make a difference. What's our regional strategy? How do we link that in with some of the other tenets of the XR strategy that Ross and Sarah have mentioned already? So it starts to mobilize the movement at the same time at a strategic level.
Thank you, Neil. That's really helpful, and it's really helpful to contextualize kind of that structurally and practically on the ground how we turn small ideas into big and share the learning. So thank you. Rod, how about you strategically?
Yeah, I think I echo all that for the same for training as it is for patients. Exactly the same. We need to make sure that we're building the right capabilities now, and I think looking at other technologies and other areas that we've been looking at. We've been scaling to telemedicine over the last 6 to 12 months, 18 months around COVID, and building virtual wards. we weren't ahead of the game. And I think we have the opportunity right now to be ahead of the game, but to also stay ahead of the game. You know, so much around, it's good to hear somebody actually mention the word interoperability. It's the word I hate the most, but so critical. You know, whether it's making sure that we're building the right fire profiles, whether we're making sure we're building the right regulations and the evidence standards. It's really important we get that right very early to make sure that we have the capability there to scale. But it is also really important to support the people who do tactical delivery right now. Yeah, there's so many good things happening across the UK, across the globe. How we recognise that and how we learn from that, not go back into our siloed centres and try and build something, you know, outwards. The expertise, the knowledge is out there in the market already. How do we leverage that and how do we bring that to the centre to be able to say, this is what's good, this is how we do something. And that's only done by working in partnership and collaboration. And I think we've proved in other areas we can change that. But if we don't stay ahead of the game, like we haven't in certain areas, we're playing catch up. And playing catch up is the worst place you could ever be, particularly within the NHS, you know, as big as it is, where we have, you know, 125 different suppliers offering telemedicine active in the NHS right now. Imposing something retrospectively into that space is really, really hard. So how do we do that now, get it right the first time? We have a whole team called Get It Right First Time in the NHS. That, you know, that's part of what we work with, and the job they do is to say, let's work with it and let's build it, you know, in an agile way. I haven't seen the NHS work so agile as I have over the last sort of 18 months in response to COVID. But those are the things that need to stick now for us to be able to move things like this forward.
Neil, did you have another?
I just wanted to come in and just pick up on something you said, Rod, and that's about, you know, it is about getting it right first time. And GIRFT, as we affectionately know it as, is all about reducing unwarranted variation in the system. And what we have to make sure we're doing is we put patients at the centre of this, patient safety at the centre of this, because I feel like this is, there's a really massive opportunity, but it's a fragile opportunity if we end up deploying a load of technology that actually causes unwarranted harm, unintentional outcomes. So critical to this has got to be, is it safe? It's not just safe in terms of, you know, all aspects of safety, in terms of its security of operating this technology, but actually, does it improve patient care, whether that's through the people I use this stuff to help train, become better clinicians, or if it's being used by patients directly. And that's got to be fundamentally at the center of this. And then what we end up with, and no doubt in not too many years' time, is the healthcare metaverse, our own chapter of that metaverse.
And I think one of the key things that the audience in the US, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but might be interested in, is how Story Futures, UKRI, NHSX, HE, how have you come together to do this, to create a national strategy for XR? Like what were the tools, and how do we carry that forward?
Just very quickly, I'd say I think the report galvanized all those organizations. You know, we typically do talk to other arm's length bodies and other organizations in the UK health space, but actually having that single focus on the report to actually bring those organizations together, I think was very much the first step. We are doing that more and more and more across other areas. And I think, as I said, whether it's COVID or other things, have forced us to be able to do things in partnership. But actually the benefit we've already seen from doing that, the benefit of, you know, talking to HE and academia and others to say, okay, how do we move this thing forward together? The report has helped galvanize that, I think.
Thank you. From our colleagues in the US, for you, can you give us some insight into where healthcare strategy is in the US, if there's any kind of parallels in what we've done so far, or if there's any nascent movement towards it? I know Ryan Beams is on the call. I know Bob's here as well, or if anybody else wants to talk about how they perceive this kind of work can be achieved in the US as well.
So Ross, just one thing while we continue the conversation, can I suggest sending a sign-up sheet around capturing
Yes,
before
if that's
people
okay,
depart.
we're gonna, in fact, I might just pass this around now if people are happy to write their names on the back of our.
Name and email.
Yeah, name and email would be great, and organisation, please.
Just in terms of, I don't, the US doesn't really have a national strategy at this point. I think with some discussions starting to happen with the XRA Association and some representatives here, and they have close relationships with Congress and US government, that will start putting those feelers together. The one thing I did want to suggest and can kind of pass this off to Ryan is, and I think Steve can attest to this, is there's a MDIC and with FDA has facilitated an MedXR working group with 4 subgroups that's now been kind of going on for a better part of a year. It's not perfect, it has fits and starts, but we are making progress in different areas. And I think it would be extremely helpful to have UK counterparts participate in those working groups. And actually, we can then identify common issues, between both countries and have some a framework that can probably be helpful for both.
Thanks, Bob. How about, I know, not to put you on the spot, Ryan, but have you got any insight into where the US are in terms of a national strategy?
Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to echo what Bob said. I'm not aware of a national strategy. I think there's a lot of conversations happening between different government agencies and then also with companies kind of across all the stakeholders. And yeah, thank you, Bob, for mentioning the MDIC effort. So that's one example of a public-private partnership that we're working on to try to address some of the growing needs in this area. Because so about 2 years ago, I guess, we hosted a public workshop at the FDA to try to start some of these conversations, because more or less similar to what you guys are saying with having this larger effort, it became clear that we needed more voices. We needed the voices of all the stakeholders ranging from patients to hardware manufacturers to try to push these technologies forward in a safe and effective way. So I really like the effort that's happening that I'm hearing about in the UK. And it'd be nice, I think, if we had something similar. I don't know if Susan or someone else from one of the other government agencies has anything to add that I might have missed.
No, I mean, I think you guys encapsulated it really well. At the NIH, certainly there's investment in generating some of the evidence we need to show efficacy, safety, validity, but that is a pretty decentralized effort where sort of individual grants are being funded. So I'm not aware of anything beyond the kinds of efforts that Ryan and MDIC and Bob are putting up that's really happening in the US.
Thanks, Susan. That's really helpful. And I think in the spirit of the way that the UK operates, we're always happy to share. And one of the things that we've set out to do with the XR Health Alliance is to bring together academia, corporations and business and clinicians, because this is the model that we see working in the UK. And we've got in the report, we've got some case studies of how that's been successful. And we've got some people in the room that operate in terms of that collaboration. Helen represents one of the academic institutes that contributed to the paper. Helen?
Can I just say something on that? Because I think the partnership working has been critical, not only thinking about some of the patient safety aspects, but also thinking about how we generated evidence for some of these interventions. Our interventions have been in healthcare, mental health care. I'm a researcher and professor of clinical psychology. And I guess one of the things I've been learning as a mental health advisor is we need to be rethinking our models of evidence generation. We can't be relying on RCTs and the usual strategies for developing evidence that we've relied on in medical spheres. We need to be looking at models that have been used in computer science and integrating those more effectively. And I think for each of us, when we've been working in these partnerships, we've been reflecting on our own models of development, evidence generation, and safe implementation, and learning from each other, and that's been critical for success, I think.
Thank you. Christina.
And I'll just add to that, I'm from Story Teachers and Royal Holloway, where we bring together academics and immersive innovators to create these kinds of prototypes, I think. And Helen, works with us quite a lot as a sort of research lead. Another really crucial aspect from our point of view is routes to market. So how do you actually, you have all these amazing, brilliant ideas, and then how do you actually bring them into market? Who do you work with? How do you, use the evidence that Helen is talking about to then actually be able to integrate it into healthcare provision, in both clinical and non-clinical aspects. And this is where, coming together with the NHS and, other people who really understand that environment is invaluable from our point of view.
So, and in the room as well, we've got two of the clinicians that featured in the report as case studies. Ivan or Farhan, have you got any insight into how you work, what you do, and how that kind of relationship, those three key players, has led to your success?
Well, the work that we do, it's primarily around it's finding the unmet need and working with the NHS to identify what's required. So we're not just making something for the sake of it, and it's getting patients and the clinicians involved very early on. It's essential, and if you can't do that at the beginning, you're not going to steer the ship later on, because you're just going to go too far. I find that those collaborations are just essential across the board.
Excellent. And how about yourself, Farhan? So I know you're a GP by trade. How does being a GP and a tech leader work for you?
I think I'd like to what Ivan said. One is that it is a fixed patients in health. Also, it's important that we need to stop thinking as virtual therapeutic. Digital therapeutic is something separate to a conventional therapy. It is therapy that the patient needs. It needs to be prescribed just like any therapy. It should be validated just like any other therapy, and that's what we've been working on. Where a pathway is searched, the patient physician decides patient will benefit from X, Y, and Z, and at a click of the button, is able to prescribe that particular therapy, be it face-to-face, be it a virtual therapy, be it a medical device. And there's been a lot of work done to educate the clinicians to work with the systems, to have those pathways in place, to have the evidence base to support that, that supports that the VR therapy does not inferior to a conventional model of care. So really blending within the seamless integrated system of delivering self-service. That we've been very successful in that the last sort of 18 months or so. In fact, when COVID struck, all the face-to-face model of care was suspended. The only model that was working near equivalent to face-to-face model in the UK was the therapy for lung rehab that we were running. We follow the same things. So I think we need to start talking about VR as the mainstream service rather than a fringe experience.
Thank you, Farhan. Charles, welcome. Can you give us some of your insight into the work that you've done in the UK and how you made it work?
Yeah, so I'm also a clinician and see the huge potential for VR for therapy. And in my second life as a startup founder, trying to measure how people are responding to what they're experiencing, I do think that the point made earlier on about the importance of both models that allow them to be funded, but also to ensure safety are key. And I think one element that we can maybe borrow from is actually from the pharmaceutical industry, because unlike, say, digital app, what VR gives you is an experience, and that experience will differ from person to person. And so there is a dosing effect, and there's a real risk, obviously, that people can be overdosed. So I think one framework around safety has to be about understanding the dose of the treatment, the dose of the therapy that's been applied to the individual, because it's going to be prescribed, and obviously as a doctor, the principle is above all else do no harm. It's really important to consider that as part of the framework for safety regulation and rollout.
Thanks, Charles. So in turning to the US and globally, how does that fit with the model here and further afield? And do you you see that same kind of clinical, academic, and kind of corporate or business partnership model? Is that how it's working in the US? You know, we've got some representatives from Penumbra. What's the model here, and how does it work, and how is it similar or different?
Well, I just want to take a step back. We said there's not a national strategy in the US, and that's probably true for like healthcare strategy in general, but the DoD does have a strategy for how it envisions XR being used, and medics are part of that. So there is a medical care strategy within the DoD that's just not been kind of delivered to a national health system, because we don't really have one. So kind of hard to make a strategy for something that doesn't exist. So I just wanted to make people aware of that. But the DoD does have strategies for how it envisions XR being used for medical outcomes of, say, warfighters or soldiers in the field. We're happy to talk more about that. We partner with people to do kind of these detection events left of boom, right? So before a mass casualty event, before a COVID or something, like using wearable systems. So we see the government, at Teledyne FLIR, we have partnerships, and so the government is our customer. Yeah. In that respect. And so the government will put out a BAA or some kind of announcement, funding vehicle, and then we'll apply to that, and then we'll work with companies. So we'll partner with universities to do things like pupillometry on heads-up displays, or and then detection events to be able to build 3D digital models to create kind of this ecosystem to drive those healthcare solutions. So I do think that exists.
Thank you.
So I will start by saying a few things about some basic facts. Fact is that Microsoft was able to slightly delay the deal with the DoD for over $20 billion of HoloLens, just to start. Then you have Mayo Clinic that are putting together one of the most amazing, impressive platforms to teach more than 4,000 students as a start in their own. I recommend every single one in this room and anyone that cares about improving patient care and outcome to focus on what the Mayo Clinic is doing. And they are in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. So, and there's many more examples. Specifically with Penumbra, what we've been doing is talking about government. We had received approval from the FDA for an immersive healthcare platform called the Real System, as I described earlier in my introduction. The FDA approved it as a hardware platform that allows us to bring more and more software applications on it. Think about it, PlayStation for healthcare. And we already have on it in hospitals for physical therapy, for occupational therapy, in rehab centers, private and inpatient, since June of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, with all the delays. And then the FDA continuously were pushing to move into remote healthcare or telehealth. And then we started and released another product in August of this year. Danielle here can speak more into that. She's on the commercial side, I'm on the research side. But specifically, we released the I-series of the Real Immersive Healthcare platform, which targeted with telehealth, revolutionary telehealth, where you are in the VR experience as a patient. Your caregiver and or clinician can be there in video and speak to you and see in real time what you see as a patient. And that's for mental health and wellness. Again, as a platform with multiple applications. So when you talk about over 100, what I refer to as, some people call them ISVs, or some people call them third-party developers, but companies from all over the space treating different types of indications, from Parkinson to dementia to Alzheimer's to depression to anxiety. Everyone's trying. We at Penumbra are developing that platform that we already launched but building the install base in hospitals and many, many different healthcare facilities to enable all these third parties to go to market strategy. Riley Russell is the target. If you are a developer of a product, software or hardware, he's the one that's going to bring it on the Penumbra healthcare, immersive healthcare platform. But my point is to respond to the British innovation, which, by the way, I got funded back in 2009 with a company called Limbs Alive out of England. And the government over there funded and gave us funding, which was amazing, to accelerate the development of our technology to today's fully integrated into the real system. I would say a lot of big giant companies, and you see Stryker sitting here, you can hear Medtronic talking later, or already I think it's past. Anyway, you see the biggest companies in the world of healthcare, Philips and others, are already doing things that are years back triggered by great work by the both organization, the government of both England and US and beyond that, many other countries.
Thank you very much.
Can I just add one thing? I think we want to be the corporate partner that gets the technical delivery of these systems in, so that everybody else could bring their applications.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add for the mental health component that my experience has been that it is very not only fragmented and all over the place. So I'm thrilled to be in this space because I feel like I've been in a vacuum by myself for a long time. So I'm so happy to meet all of you. And also that if you do readings from psychology from even 100 years ago, people were talking about how slow psychology is to change. And then we introduce anything that's digital and you have a lot of resistance. So I think the more evidence-based for sure, the more organized, the better we come together and have a presentation to the different aspects of the mental health world, then that is going to improve the ability for adoption phenomenally. I've been speaking about it, writing about it. I've been the pariah and the black sheep of my niche of my field for a long time. So thank you for all being here and for the people who are here for mental health. Let's please come together.
Okay. And I think that's the message you can hear loud and clear in the room. Yeah, we're open to share, we're open to work in that way. And if anything that we've done in terms of strategically bringing together the UK, we can work with the US on, that would be helpful.
A question about the UK. Amir brought up something that I've seen before, is the government being willing to write a check in a strategic industry. Could you talk a little bit about both the financial resources and the non-financial resources to get startups over the clinical evidence hump that other startups don't face in other industries?
Yeah, you've actually read my notes, because the next section we're going to talk about this is a very good preemptive question. So I'm going to hold you just for a second, and there was a gentleman here, and then we'll move on to your question. Thank you.
I was wondering what is actually being shared throughout England, because everyone has their own IP and there are things that they don't want to share given how the field is driven by businesses. So what is it that you already share in England that American companies would be willing to share and would be willing to give up, so to speak?
Do you mean in terms of kind of individual applications or the wider strategic vision?
Concrete, like projects or information that you share with everybody in the organization or everyone who's a member. Not like what is the goal that you all share, but what are the materials that you share?
So this is one of the things, and I'm sure Rod and Neil or Shankar, you take
Yeah, so I think just to answer your question slightly differently, I think the difference is that if you're a company and you're going to one hospital, you've got to get through this company explaining your products and services. The advantage of coming together as a country, as the NHS, is that we have organisations like Health Education England, NHSX, who we hope can assess those technologies. And now instead of hospital, it's every hospital in the UK. And we have a real problem with technology and scaling. Not only does it not cross one ward on this corridor to the other, it doesn't cross hospitals. So we're hoping this approach means that we can come together and actually we're taking baby steps. And you're right, this technology isn't a fringe thing anymore. But let's work out what the best things are for pain. And actually come to us instead of as an individual hospital, as a country, and say we should do this. And actually, Rod, you know, the team here are key at basically saying, essentially, you know, these guys say this is the technology, let's try it. We can actually deploy it properly, and then we can get meaningful data, and then we can show value because we're actually stuck in a bit of a loop at the moment. So, you know, as a company, you keep your IP. That's not what this is about. What we're saying is let's change the game. Let's say instead of you struggling with a little hospital.
Can I help my colleague over there to come back, if I may, try to translate your question into actionable tactical deliverables, as I think he's looking for. What you need as a company that is developing applications or products in immersive healthcare, you need, if the government is willing to help with the adoption of a very conservative industry, specifically hospitals, which is the most conservative in adopting unique technology, is identifying what the VA in the United States has done. Identify the, I'll give that VA example, the 25.
Is that the Veterans Association?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're like the kings of like acronyms, so
Normally 3 letters.
Too short. That's
Yeah.
3 letters.
So the Veteran Administration has identified 25 hospitals out of more than 100 that are dedicated for innovation evaluation. And if you want, and the VA is by far and you heard information about how they're adapting technologies, but if you go to them, they have specific processes to accept technologies that normally will not be accepted by any other hospital, especially not the other 75 or more hospitals of the VA. So to be tactical, if you can come in from the UK and say, we identify, like my clinic, we identify 10 hospitals that you can have a fast pass into introducing technology, testing it, creating the necessary clinical trials within those, create the processes with those partner hospital chains or hospitals. That's going to help companies that are starting up. I've been trying to do it for more than 14 years now, and it took forever to get, you know, and I can give you some hospitals in the US, and I'm more than happy anybody wants help. We'll introduce them to the hospitals that are outside of the VA, including to the VA themselves. But that's what you need, and I think that will be the kind of help that people need.
Thank you.
I'll jump in.
To respond to that point,
Just you know, there's always going to be multiple routes for funding, which will be applicable to different kind of circumstances. And there's a personal view I'm going to share. It's not necessarily always up to the taxpayer to fund every kind of initiative, every innovation to see whether it's going to make a difference and improve the way we deliver healthcare or how we train people. One of the things that I want to see established through the work that we're doing is that we create the right context where, as a healthcare system, we can better articulate the problems we're trying to solve. We don't necessarily know the solutions, but we may approach companies in the XR space to say, do you have any ideas as to how you might be able to solve some of these problems? We need to be experts in the problems that we're facing. We need to interface with academia and private industry to come up with the ways that we need to solve it. Now, that may mean that public money gets invested to support, to support piloting or testing out. But equally, though, if we become much, much better as organizations or as national sort of coalitions or national bodies to articulate the problems, that facilitates small, medium enterprise to access VC, to access investment, which further sort of takes away that friction of access into the market.
So just allow me to clarify. I completely, it sounds like maybe everybody, but sounds like I was misunderstood. I believe that the government should not ever fund anything because there are experts, VCs and other type of investment organizations that are experts in investing. I don't believe you should invest in anything, if I may ask. I think, unless you have reasons that I don't see why needed, but what you can do is exactly what I think you could do, is help identifying hospitals that are willing to test and are willing to show data and are willing to show investors that data, and those investors, if they see a road to commercialization of a significant number of applications and they see the ecosystem growing, they will invest in it, meaning we will invest in it, and there's others that will invest in it. That's the main difficulty that you can definitely crack.
I mean, you absolutely have a huge willingness within the UK, so include Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, the whole part of the UK to be able to share and collaborate without sort of undermining, commercial sensitivities, etc. We host a number of sort of informal gatherings on every couple of weeks on a Friday morning. We've got over 40 hospital sites coming together, talking about their applications in mixed reality, talking about the different companies they work with and the different things they're doing, sharing informally. We're trying to move them up to sharing more, sharing informally, more sharing formally. But there is the appetite out there. I think this is about, this whole sort of scene is nascent. It's kind of it's not even in its adolescence yet. So we've got a long way to go. But I think what I'm seeing is a context of collaboration that I've not necessarily picked up elsewhere. So it's not just the sort of public sector dragging private industry partners with them saying, we must tell others about what we're doing. Can we share the kind of outcomes? People are saying, yeah, let's share. Because that's enabling that innovation to leap forward, and it's enabling new partners to come together. It's very interesting.
Whilst we're on the topic as well of funding, very briefly, Matt, I wonder if it would be helpful, just for the benefit of everyone in the room, to introduce who UKRI are and what Innovate UK do as well, and how that sort of funding model works, and where that money comes from.
Yeah, happy to. So UKRI, which is UK Research and Innovation, is a combination of all the research councils plus Innovate UK. Essentially, it's kind of the funding body for R&D in the UK with a budget, but it was around $6.5 billion, I think it was. It's just gone up in the recent budget. So the idea was to really sort of try and pull together the various councils, and including Innovate, to try and define a kind of an innovation kind of ecosystem where there was a kind of joined up investment plan and funding plan, from early stage R&D through applied industrial research to pre-commercialization and commercialization at scale to add value to UK economy. So that's a kind of broad remit. I suppose the reason we get into this space and the argument for why public funding is essentially we can de-risk some of that process. So it's about, from our point of view, it's about a number of things, but one is about looking at the kind of the innovation landscape and is there ways that we can accelerate that innovation, especially recently around the kind of pandemic and the shift towards distributed digital architecture. And actually, from a more of the future point of view, it's about kind of distributed teams and distributed production, distributed audience, and hybrid revenue models. But actually, audiences in that context is anybody. That's just consumers of digital content. So actually, when you look at those models in terms of distributed architecture and how you can deliver that content and something to a wide distributed audience, it becomes more interesting. But I think, from our point of view, it's about using public money to leverage that private investment, de-risk that profile. It might be time, it might be cost, it might be risk, it might be people. Just encouraging that kind of early stage R&D so that you can then support that to kind of improve, I guess, the chances, the likelihood, the opportunities around some of these interesting innovative solutions. I suppose just as a very sort of quick final point, one of the things that we do is, because I think you get a lot of organisations who go, oh, we want this innovative solution, we're going to run this procurement pipeline. And actually what you get there is people, they already think they know what the answer to that question is. They go out into the market and they go out to SMEs and they're basically looking to kind of buy that solution. And that's very hard to innovate in that space because the people with the money already know what they want. So I think what we can do is we can try and sort of help de-risk that process. So actually, you can try and define that problem space in such a way that the statement of need and the statement of challenge is specific enough that you will get the solution that you want, but generic enough you might get those really innovative solutions that you didn't know were there. And they're saying we can help those kind of edge case solutions, those potentially really interesting innovations by sort of providing some level of public funding and public support, like say, to de-risk that pipeline.
Just really to add to what Matt is saying, we at Story Futures were funded by UKRI as well, and we're at Royal Holloway University, which brings together academics and innovators. Many of them come from actually a kind of film and TV creative background rather than technology background. So the kind of ecosystem in that space is quite different. There isn't necessarily this kind of investment model or, that kind of thing. So they're crossing over into immersive, working with technologists, working with researchers. And quite a lot of what we do is very small scale. I wouldn't even call it investments, like really small scale projects. It can be £5,000 or £10,000. And really, it's not about the funding as such. It's very often about giving people the time and space to get to know each other, to try and think about ideas together, to come up with these really early stage ideas that neither the company nor the academic would have ever thought of, just by themselves. And so what we do is we help them think through the model, the business model, the kind of scalability aspects, and where is this going next. And also we have an audience research team that is quite cutting edge, because when you think about researching and testing, these kinds of prototypes, they have many different aspects of it. You've got the audience aspect, you've got the kind of like clinical and the evidence aspect. So there's a lot of different things that come together as part of this program. So I think there is, from what we've seen, there's real value in giving people the time and space to do some, really blue sky thinking and see what comes out on the other end.
Thank you. This gentleman here.
First of all, thank you for this effort. I don't want to burst your bubble, but just reality check. When we get to work with hospitals, we have doctors, we have nurses, we have other professionals that really love to use our technology. We just can't go past IT. So we had hospitals that we came with a solution based on an iPad, and they said, no, we are Android phone. And then we came and said, we have a solution with the webcam. They said, okay, it has to run on our computers. I don't know how in the UK, the US computers cannot do computer vision very well using the webcam. So what I'm saying is that you guys are content experts, subject matter experts, and want to do research and data. I just want to get in. I just want to be able to run my application, to be able to collect that data. So if part of your roadmap, you can say, these are the approved technologies. Like, I don't want you to run on Google. I want you to run on Microsoft. I don't want this. I don't want. Just tell us what you want up front. And like I used to tell my kids when they were baby, just cry very clear. I don't understand. Just be very clear when you cry.
Point to the bloody knee.
That's the first child. Second child, yeah.
It's a really good point though, because often we do get stuck with IT, and I have to reassure you that NHS-focused departments are not super stellar either. And so lots of companies have said to us, it's been a nightmare working with the IT department. Firstly, they're too slow. They have no idea about pace. And secondly, there's always 400 different problems. But I do think that that is a really valid point that we need to articulate in this, which how to facilitate moving forward. Thank you.
And I think this is where the opportunities to work with other industries is really exciting as well, because we aren't necessarily starting from scratch. A few years ago, we ran an innovation sprint with a games university, essentially, where we had healthcare specialists in the room and some of the original developers of Grand Theft Auto. It was brilliant. But we started to talk about these issues around distribution and how that works. And some of the developers and games veterans were like, well, we've kind of done this before. Like, we've set up distribution platforms. So I think this is where that collaborative working model is really interesting, because obviously we do have these existing structures all over the world of working in hospitals, but also thinking about how we can look to what other industries are doing and bring that learning in as well. So I think that's a really interesting thing.
Yes, thank you.
So for me, this is a really good segue to the fact that one of the reasons that IT is such a pain in the ass to work with is that especially in the United States, hospitals will get sued for violations, right? So they have to be very risk averse. And one thing we're not talking about that much in this room is that we haven't partnered enough with our friends in cybersecurity. And if we can create more generalized cyber standards for securing the most important type of data there is, which is biometrics, we might actually be able to make some progress, because they would feel somewhat insulated from this risk if there were international standards around these kinds of frameworks and standards. And I work also within the cyber and intelligence community, and there are so many interesting things happening there. I mean, they're thinking about securing national infrastructures and defense. We should be looking to our friends in these spaces to, one, not just secure things, but increase we've thrown around the word interoperability, but the standards, and especially naming standards in the namespace, that is something that we really need to come together as a diverse community and agree upon, because once data is named, it can actually be secured and it can be requested and authenticated based on its data type, and that changes the entire landscape.
Why do you think that's a VR problem? Why
It's not, it's an entire digital health. But what I'm saying is that in the healthcare space, it's a special problem, and it's the reason that IT and hospitals don't want to embrace innovation to the extent that they ought to be, because they're really afraid that the data is just going to get out there.
We saw hospitals that running Windows XP.
That's right. Well, it's kind of like NASA, right? They want things that are flight tested.
Yeah. So
right, that aren't going to fail, that we're demonstrating not to
This
fail.
is so good. In the UK, we thought we were unique in this problem.
Oh, no.
That's brilliant.
So
it's not. But
so for
for
like 14 years, I was trying to do it myself with our company, with my first stroke rehab product in 2009, with the help of the British government. And what I learned, I never wanted to be part of a big healthcare company. That would be the last thing I ever wanted to be. I never worked for anyone. I never wanted to work for anyone. But I just realized that if I really want to achieve my goal, my dream, my mission, that is shared with many, people that were working with me, I have no choice, because the hospitals will not trust a non-healthcare company as a start. They just don't. You cannot get through. If you're like a Silicon Valley startup, which I was, you just can't get through the red tape just because of who you are, because you are not Stryker, you are not Medtronic, you are not Penumbra, and Penumbra is a relatively small company compared to Stryker and Medtronic. But still, the point to be made is, go back to the exact point. You have to be working with a strategic partner if you're a startup with brilliant solutions for very big problems. Then you have to align yourself with a medical device company that knows how to sell into the healthcare industry, UK, US, Africa, Asia, doesn't matter where you are. If you want to go in, you have to go in with people that know how to do it. That's my lesson. And then, if the government wants to help, find those hospitals that the government will give them subsidies for upgrading their IT, for upgrading their systems to enable technologies, innovations from medical device companies to come in, like the VA did with those 25 hospitals.
Yeah, and I think it's a very, very good point, and I think it chimes exactly with our recommendations. One of the second recommendation we showed you with the pipeline, one of the second or third parts of that was that exact point, is to have a center of excellence. So we know this site is going to deal with pain, this site is going to deal with physical rehabilitation, and that learning is really, really key and critical, because if we can then open it up so that we talk to the IT department at the beginning and say, okay, by the way, we're going to do immersive healthcare here, and that means that actually we can't just operate on a closed system that's got all of the regulation. We need to kind of annex something and then look at how we can test it and then bring it into the mainstream, and that's the key. So thank you, that's really, really helpful. Quickly, and then I'm going to move on to our final subject of regulation.
Very quick, I feel like there's an elephant in the room here, which is called Meta, and I feel like they're able to make products, use all of our collective innovation ideas, and circumvent all of these little, frameworks and standards and things like that we have under the guise of wellness or whatever they want to call these products. And so how do we get some teeth into our legislation? I know Christina's here. She's one of the greatest voices in this area. I'd love to hear from her ideas of how we get teeth into legislation so we can keep Meta from basically undermining all the work we're trying to do here collectively.
Thank you. I think that, well, that's a helpful segue, and it would be helpful to talk about regulation. It would be helpful to talk about data standards and digital standards. Rod, do you want to talk a little bit about the DTAC in the UK and our approach there?
So just very quickly, we had a standard that was essentially a gateway to digital apps. But when I started, that was one of the first programs I was given. And I suddenly realized it was actually a massive barrier to innovation as opposed to an enabler, which is something I've heard in many, many other countries that we've spoken to since. And we said, right, okay, we need to relook at what we're doing. We set out essentially what was an ISO standard, and we openly consulted on a very high bar for digital health tech. And whilst the feedback in general was, that's fabulous, but we're nowhere near being able to achieve that, we need to define what the baseline for entry is. The baseline gives everybody the opportunity to step in and play. So essentially, we now have the DTACs, the Digital Technology Assessment Criteria, which is broad for all digital health tech. And so it doesn't matter if it's a telemed or whether it's VR or anything else. And essentially, it sets out the baseline criteria for clinical safety, interoperability, data protection, and technical assurance. So absolute baselines that everybody now in the whole of the UK, if they're selling products into the UK, they need to achieve. But we've done that actually to empower buyers make better decisions around technology, not to support innovators. The innovators and suppliers have to meet that criteria, but the buyers have more confidence. And I think trying to bring it back into the funding point, so much of what we're funding as the NHS is change management funding, as opposed to the technology funding. The technology technically isn't the problem with the funding around it. It's how do we get the right people in the system making the right decisions. And by making sure that there are national standards, as Shankar will say, it is national standards, but we build on those standards for particular areas. So we've just built on one for one of our digital health mental health services. So it's a DTAC plus additional criteria. And we're starting to roll that out across all our national clinical and policy teams, giving them the confidence to be able to make the decision of saying, this is the technology, whether it's advice and guidance, all the way through to cognitive behavioral therapies or whatever it is, they have the confidence to be able to say, these products have met the baseline standards of the NHS. Here's the evidence standards, here's the data standards and the data sets that need to be met. Publish them, and we're trying to give the policy teams, our policy teams, the absolute confidence to stand behind them. That's where a lot of the nervousness is from the centre. Is once something's published, it can be criticised and challenged, but having that confidence to say, no, this is the standard and this is what needs to move forward. That is what we're working on right now, to give everybody the confidence to say, it doesn't matter what the technology is. If you meet these standards, as you were saying earlier, it doesn't matter, as someone was saying, Farron was saying, it doesn't matter if it's a traditional therapy or a VR therapy. It doesn't matter, it's still a therapy. And we need to make sure that all those things are meeting those standards. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done around it. And obviously with VR, we need to start thinking about libraries and source code and making everything as standard as possible. So if somebody does develop something, somebody can lean in and go, that's really good, can I do something else? Can I do it? There isn't proprietary standards, there isn't proprietary interoperability, the challenges that come with each of it. That's why I said right at the beginning, we should stay ahead of that curve. We've got a really good chance of making sort of XR and immersive healthcare really mainstream.
Javier and colleagues from XRSI contribute to the report in terms of regulations. What do you see as kind of the most positive changes, and what do you still see as the gaps?
And that's the thing, Ross, thank you for bringing me into this. The report wouldn't have been possible without the knowledge that HE NHS shares with us. So Addison, we had shared the frameworks that NHSX was building while training people on the clinic floor. They were standardizing the things. So we kind of absorbed that knowledge. And then likewise, Rod is talking about DTAC. Now we're going to try to enhance that DTAC and apply the filter of XR and sort of enhance that. At XRSI, we're building medical XR safety framework. So we will adopt whatever, we absorb that knowledge. So earlier, a gentleman was asking, what is being shared? This is what is being shared, and it is so crucial. As a result, the very first law that will be written in the United States is the COMBRA Act. And I encourage everyone to look it up. It is called Children and Media Research Advancement Act. Since 2014, there's something called this Public Health Service Act. Has not been enhanced. So when the Congress Act, it is already introduced to Congress. Once it passes the Senate and other committees, it will literally open up funding. What did XRSI do? We added artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and virtual reality to that act. So that's also funding where, we talk about the US strategy. That Public Health Service Act is going to be amended. The last time it was amended was during pandemic. So I think there is a lot of this exchange of knowledge that is going to fuel these, and enhance funding. And that's what is really kind of happening behind the scenes. And this roundtable is really testament to bringing that knowledge out. There is a lot of opportunities really. Let's stay ahead is what I hear from Neil too, and the one word that I thought would not be mentioned, but Neil mentioned is the metaverse. And what is this metaverse? Who are going to be the key player and how do we secure and stay ahead? Medical assessments are going to be done in this metaverse. People would be able to visit, like hospitals, as we know, would not exist in its form, Remember, like the tricorder, I know I'm kind of going a little bit further in the future, but today we sit here together to lay the foundation. And Neil said we could do it safely. That's why all that knowledge of BTEC, applied filter of XR, and then just enhance this knowledge and work together with Senator Markey, because we did, and add to these laws that are currently being written. Enhancements are being made because of pandemic, because we have literally moved to digital already. It's done. We're now making laws to make sure we don't fuck it up. So yeah, I mean, I just encourage everyone to sort of. This is so commendable that UK is taking the lead to invite the rest of the world to make the medical XR safe and standardized. So it's upon us now to come together at the end.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I think that's it.
I was just going to say that the one sort of luxury we have with NHSX is we have a foot both within NHS England Improvement, which is where our policy is set, but also within government, Department of Health. And essentially that gives us the ability to work across multiple agencies. And I recently sponsored a piece of work with the MHRA, who's our regulator, and with NICE, who we use for our clinical safety standards.
Could you explain the acronyms?
So the MHRA is the Medical Health Regulation Authority. 3 years you remember. And NICE is the National Institute of Clinical Excellency. I remember that one. And essentially we have something called an ILAP, which I will look at this, which is our innovative licensing and access pathway for meds. We're now in the process of trying to build a digital version of that for the first time, which we're way behind the curve on, but at least we're getting it done. And again, what we're trying to do is to focus on how we sponsor products through that are meeting a critical unmet need. That's where we're going to start, but that will scale rapidly once we get it right, to say, how do we get the right products through? So we start to look at conditional approval, and we start to look at conditional funding for things that have met those requirements. And that'll be a really, really big step forward to say, I've started to produce evidence. Now I haven't got my full evidence standards framework piece done with NICE. I don't have my 2-3 years yet of evidence. But what I do have is evidence of impact, both over to the system or to patients. How do I use that and how do I move forward at pace? And we haven't really got those tools at the moment. So I think building that will really give us that capability.
Thanks a lot. Just the final point from the lady there.
Sure, I just want to actually reemphasize what Kavya said and point out that in the US, we do have a decentralized system, which doesn't really make it all that easy from a regulatory perspective to address to address all of these other cases in a very swift way, right? I mean, we're going to get there, but it's going to take some time. I think what we have to remember is that everybody who's sitting in this room also has an opportunity to influence that system from a grassroots perspective, right? So there's the regulatory aspect and taking on things from a legal perspective, but there's also sort of this rulemaking aspect from a lot of the agencies that are represented here today, whether it be the VA or the FDA, NIH, et cetera. And so don't forget there's power in rulemaking, and then we can actually move the needle sometimes much faster than we can from a regulatory perspective, influencing not just the short term, but the long term. And so I'm actually quite optimistic that there's a lot of smart people in this room today on the call, but also sort of just in this industry at this moment in time to really move the needle. So, as much as it can kind of seem like the glass is half empty, I also want to rally everybody to make a difference where we can. And I think it can be significant.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So thank you so much, everyone, coming today. I think we've sort of covered quite a bit, but also only just scratched the surface. And I think it's so exciting for us to leave the country. But also,
you mean stand here and leave?
Yeah, come here. But also just see that there's so much enthusiasm and excitement as well from everyone in the room. As well, because I think that the opportunity here is just absolutely tremendous, but we all need to work together because there are so many people creating incredible things out there. But I think the challenge has always been that it's happening in isolation. So
before we
thing,
can I just thank both of you for fabulous efforts in pulling this together a report, but could you also name the other people? Some of the other people who have been instrumental and aren't able to join us on this trip.
Yeah, so Fiona Kilkelly was also the other founder of the XR Health Alliance, but throughout, to be honest, there have been so many people in the UK. The reason why we've done this is we've seen so many people in the UK that do brilliant pieces of work, but they're on their own and they're doing it in isolation, and it's really stuff that needs to be celebrated. And sometimes it is, but they're kind of brought out onto the stage, they're celebrated, and then they go back and they carry on their work, and it benefits just a few people. So yeah, we were really keen that we start this kind of movement essentially and bring everyone together. So thank you as well. We want you to be part of it going forward.
So a couple more announcements. You can't leave yet. Okay. 2 more minutes to show you all the things that are happening. So tomorrow we will be doing a keynote panel on the main stage. So come join us from 11:50 to 12:55. And so this will be a little bit of a rehashing of today, but actually having a bit more of a conversation in detail with more people. Also, I think we all have more to say to each other as well. So we're going to be hosting some drinks tomorrow night. As well. So we're going to be at Off the Rails Brewing Co., which is in Sunnyvale. If you need the address, then you can email us at info@xrha.org as well. What else is happening? You can follow us on Twitter at XRHA and then 2 underscores. And then also follow the International VR Healthcare Association and XRSI, which are doing some really brilliant work too. IVRA are doing some amazing things across the conference as well. They're doing a book signing tomorrow for the new book that's coming out, and then the medical track is on Thursday as well. I don't know if you have anything else to add. Dublin, there's also a conference happening in Dublin, if anyone wants to cross the pond, which is happening in December as well. And then also I noticed that Shankar has a 360 camera, and I feel like we can't be talking about immersive and not take a photo of everyone. So if you want to squeeze in the middle. Take a little photo and then we'll let you all be on your merry way.
There's a question.
And there's a question. Where can we watch the record? The record will be on the AWE website as well. So we'll be uploading that. Well, they'll be uploading that.
Have you guys saved the chat in a file so that because people put a lot of information?
Yeah, and then we will save the chat as well. Thank you everyone for sharing your emails. Perhaps what we can do is we can send that link out. And then I'm going to let you share your information between each other because there are security considerations to make.
That's about 360 cameras. You just press that and it takes
And everyone says, "Oh."
Maybe everyone should take them, are we allowed to take our masks off and smile?
I think we could probably do it very temporarily.
Demasking.
Well done, guys. Thank you.
Cool.
We'll
Thanks
share
so
that
much,
on
everyone.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a
Sorry? Hey, that's what we like to hear. Cool. All right, I'm going to turn the sound off. Thank you, everyone, for joining remotely.